Hey guys, Blazen here, and today, in this video, I thought I'd talk about Space Marine 2's melee weapons. This doesn't just pertain to patch 7, but I do just want to talk about the overall state of melee weapons ever since patch 6.0. Because ever since the last major update to this game where it buffed the shit out of block weapons, I think it's safe to say at this point that block weapons are essentially the meta, and it's not really my first time saying that. Now don't get me wrong, I'm glad block weapons are viable as they've been pretty much useless for the majority of the game's life up until this point. However, now the opposite effect has happened. Now block weapons are, overpowering the balanced and fencing weapons. And I guess just to show you a little bit in this trial area I'm in, with both balance and fencing weapons, it takes about 2 to 3 gun strikes to incapacitate this majorist enemy. Versus when using a block weapon, you just have to block twice, or perfect block twice I should say, and then you can pretty much immediately retaliate back, get that one big damage in, swing a few more times, and then this majorist Tyranid is incapacitated much faster compared to a few gun strikes. Now don't get me wrong, both fencing and balancing have some downsides, and same goes for blocking. For fencing and balancing weapons is an easy one, because gun strikes can be interrupted, you're not invincible. And with blocking weapons, you actually have to perfectly time enemy attacks in order to get that block buff. And sometimes in the case of like the Lash Whip Tyranid and even the Revener, with the Lash Whip you have to block like 3 of his attacks before you can retaliate. Versus fencing and balance, you just have to parry twice, or even once. So what's my solution to solve this? Well, first let's take a look at some stats, shall we? So when you successfully parry an enemy, and you get the Gunstrike icon, the Gunstrike duration lasts for about 3 seconds. Then if we take a look at block weapons, when it comes to getting the block buff, which is what I'm going to call it, I don't know the proper name for it, but I'm going to be calling it the block buff, when your hands glow. So both, I'm going to say just block buff 1 and block buff 2, their duration lasts for a whopping 36 seconds. So you can take your sweet ass time and use that block buff damage output almost whenever you want. And not to mention, when you do output that damage, it doesn't immediately go away. If you notice that the icon has a small timer. So even if the first swing does the big damage, your next swings are still doing more damage than normal, because there's an output duration, and that output duration lasts for about 2.24 seconds. So it's no wonder why you're able to incapacitate majorist level enemies fast. Not only because of the sheer damage output, but also because of your next consecutive attacks are also buffed. It doesn't immediately go away with the first attack. So with all that in mind, here are the changes I would make to the block buff mechanics. So for block buff 1, I would increase its duration from 36 seconds up to 45 seconds. And then for block buff 2, I would decrease its duration from 36 seconds down to 3 seconds. That way this is more in line with gun strikes. However, with that being said, currently the way how block buff 2 works is when you lose block buff 2, you lose everything entirely, and you'll have to level up your block buffs again. So I would actually change this, so let's say you do lose block buff 2 in 3 seconds, you don't lose it entirely, you just go back to block buff 1. And finally, when it comes to the block buff damage output duration, which currently sits at around 2.24 seconds, I would remove this duration entirely. There should be no duration when you land the block buff attack. This will make it that only the first attack will do the big damage, and your next consecutive attacks will go back to dealing normal damage. All of these changes, I think, will bring block weapons closer and more in line with gun strikes, while still offering their own flavor of defense. Now with all that being said, let's go through all the melee weapons in the game, more specifically their balance and fencing versions, and the changes I would personally make. And specifically we're going to be looking at only the relic variants, as when you reach max level, the relic variants are going to be the ones you're going to be using, or at least for the most part. I am aware of some artificer variants of melee weapons are better than some relic variants, but again we're only going to be taking a look at relic variants, as I believe once you get those adjusted correctly, then Artificer and below can be adjusted accordingly. Now before I show you my proposed stats, let me explain quickly my mindset when it comes to my proposed stat changes. So when it comes to balanced fencing and block, my philosophy of thinking is balanced should have average strength but the highest cleaving potential, fencing weapons should have the weakest strength but have the highest swing speed, and then block simply just has the most strength. Alright, with that philosophy in mind, now I'm going to show you the proposed stat changes I made through the relic variants of all melee weapons. Now we're first going to be starting off with the combat knife, and from here on out I'm not going to commentate as much really, as I've already explained myself on my vision for these melee weapon stats. So from this point forward, I'm just going to show my proposed stats over here, and they'll be color coded, so white means nothing changed, red means it was a nerf, and green means it was a buff. Alright, I think that's pretty simple. I'll let the rest of the video rock, and I'll see you guys at the end of the video. And that's pretty much it, guys. Those are my proposed changes. If you liked the video, please leave a like, share the video around, and leave a comment down below on what you think on the state of melee weapons in Space Marine 2. And until next time, peace.